Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. This one should be pretty quick. This is a look at Oesterheld, Breccia, and Breccia. Sounds like a law firm, but you have both Alberto and Enrique Breccia working together in this book. This is the Life of Che, an Impressionist biography. I was pretty skeptical going into this one in terms of reading after having read the Evita book because I thought that just wasn't enjoyable as a comic to read. This is definitely more of a comic format. You have the history of Che presented in a narrative form. This first sequence here is drawn by Alberto Breccia's son, Enrique Breccia. It's a little bit hard for me to tell what's going on with the reproduction in this book because it's very obvious that Enrique's style is meant to look like a woodblock cut, and they mention that in some of the essays in the back. But there's also moments like this where there's some textural stuff going on purpose that's not as high fidelity as it could be. So I think even though this is supposed to look like a pretty clogged up stencil woodblock screen print type style to match that image of Che, I think that's very on purpose. I still think it's a little filled up and clogged in a way. That gets further reinforced when you get to the sections that Enrique Breccia does, because Enrique Breccia uses a lot more hatching. There's a lot of textures, stamping. There's stuff that you can tell is done by a razor. There's tones. There's things collaged in there. There's that real wide variety of techniques that you get from Alberto Breccia, especially some of these things that are pretty obviously drawn with the razor, which I know he did because I've seen the video, we've commented on it, and I've been drawing with the razor lately. I know what those marks look like pretty well and pretty intimately, and that's just a filled in version of it. It's not the worst. Like, some of the line work shows up pretty good, but a lot of the lines are definitely filled in. So I don't know how that impacted Enrique's sections, or if it would really matter to my opinion of it. But I definitely get the sense that even though this is pretty well reproduced, that Fantagraphics just didn't have access to the original materials. So again, usually with Fantagraphics, if I'm complaining about production, it's not because they don't know what they're doing. It's just because those materials don't exist anymore. And especially with a book like this that was highly controversial and political, to not that the book itself caused it, but that it's coming from a controversial enough political figure in Oesterheld that he got disappeared. Basically, it's said in the book that he got disappeared. He went to prison and no one ever heard from him since, something like that. That makes the book interesting on its own, that the content in there was from someone who was revolutionary enough. Like, that tie to the story I really like. But also that means that at the time they were living in a pretty wild place, and a lot of the art just didn't make it out. It seems like stolen, missing, gone, destroyed. So we're left with just whatever best negatives or scans of the best copy that they could find, which is unfortunate because you have images like this that I guarantee this is almost all done with a razor. And god damn, is that just a beautiful image, and the way that is all, that shrubbery is drawn there, so impressionistic. And going with the idea that this is an impressionistic biography, to have that kind of impressionistic artwork, and it just kills me because I know how beautiful that type of mark making looks, how beautiful it is to see someone really ride chaos as well as Breccia does, and it just hurts that I don't get to see it all in its original form. So that's pretty much the book. There's some stuff in here that's interesting in the story, particularly when you get to the sections where they're actually coming into Cuba and are being successful, and you get some of the shots of them being the heroes. I'd done this review once and that video got lost, so I don't have all my tabs in it. But there's a scene in here where they're basically the victors coming in and into Cuba, and I just imagining what that must have been like. Here we go. For Fidel to be coming in like after this long struggle, what it must be like to be the type of person who would like go recruit people from other countries on another continent, bring them back to your island, like overtake the island and actually be successful in that crazy effort. I can't imagine the mental state of someone who does all that successfully, first off, or even attempts it, but then much less the emotional state they must be in while they're coming in. Like this shot of Che's face here, I just can't even imagine what these people are thinking. The biggest thing that I think I enjoyed in this book, even though the art has these things about reproduction that I'm a little skeptical about and sad about, there are such strong compositions throughout, like this page right here, and the motion between these two very abstract images that makes them both abstract and imagistic. The high tenebrism of the just stark black and stark white, not chiaroscuro, that's not what that means, comic world, tenebristic image, very graphic image here. I just they're really beautiful. And there's also some images in here where I can see like influences on other things. This almost looks like Mouse to me a little bit. This looks like a Peter Kuiper book. This looks like Teddy Christensen. There's a lot of stuff I can see. I don't know if those artists were exposed to this early on enough that would have influenced them before they kind of got there. But I can definitely see if you take this type of style and then it's reproduced without perfect reproduction, you can get a lot of artists coming out of it. Rick Geary is another one that comes to mind, that kind of take what this looks like in reproduction and then go with that as a style on their own, not being aware that some of the fidelity was lost. They're looking at this and they're thinking that this looks like, you know, pretty spot on to what the artwork must have looked like, or they just enjoy the clogged look of it, and so they're going with that because it has a kind of powerful emotive application to it. So that's all very cool. There's an afterwards and a little bit of like historical information about the book. I browsed that. It was interesting to see that neither of the Breccias was particularly interested in the political standpoints of this. They didn't really care about Che or any of it. This was just a job to them, and they reiterate that many times. They may also just be divorcing themselves from it, because as it says about Oesterheld, with the return of military power in Argentina in 1976, many of Oesterheld's works were banned. Oesterheld was arrested in 1977 by a group of soldiers. It is suspected that he was killed sometime in 1978, but they don't really know what happened to him. So this is actually, you know, written by a revolutionary enough voice that he was arrested and probably murdered, which also makes it interesting. So this one much more enjoyable than the Evita one. Still some, you know, unfortunate issues with just not having access to the original art, but a much more interesting book altogether. House on Fire by Matt Battaglia is a just gorgeous book where Matt's kind of making an emotional response to the years of COVID and wrapping that into a sci-fi dystopian future that really the sci-fi dystopian's backgrounded, and you're focused on the emotional journey of two characters in a really beautiful way. And then that's enhanced by Matt's like really awesome, loose, kind of Paul Popish dry brush work. And then Sean and Matt have worked to get this second kind of orange spot color in there that's going to look really beautiful, and has allowed Matt to use his dry brush technique to add tone to the thing too. So with Sean's production technique, this is going to be a gorgeous book with a lot of heart.